Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. This last week, the Speaker in the House of Commons announced that the party leaders had come to an agreement and they will start using a remote voting app for the hybrid sittings going forward until the end of the pandemic, presumably. This is a very, very bad thing. And I know that I tend to sound alarmist about this, but at the same time as I keep warning that these are never going to be temporary measures, we saw a senator engage the parliamentary budget officer to commission a report that essentially says that if we keep up hybrid sittings, they will come up with millions of dollars in savings every year from travel costs, as well as thousands of tons of greenhouse gases, and therefore she thinks that this is a great thing that we should carry on. And this is the kind of thing that I have been warning against. I understand the notion that in a pandemic we want MPs to be able to participate as fully as possible while traveling as little as possible, but this is not necessarily the way to do it. Hybrid sittings are necessarily imperfect, and unfortunately, the result of normalizing these, even in the pandemic situation, is that it's giving MPs the notion that this is something that they should be able to carry on even after the pandemic is over. And I know this because the Liberals have been pushing for this for 5 years, even before the pandemic started. It was always about trying to make Parliament more family friendly and trying to let more MPs work from their ridings so that they could be closer to family and so on. And that and this is something that they had been trying to push through, were not able to, and now that there is an excuse for the pandemic, they are basically getting proof of concept that this can work for them. This is a mistake. Yes, they've been going forward relatively smoothly, but we keep ignoring the human cost of this, which is basically that for as much as they like to pat themselves on the back that they're staying at home, the people who run the video service and who make it all happen have to be there in the Parliament buildings, and it takes more people to run these than it does a normal sitting day. So they're not necessarily being honest there as well. But the bigger cost is to the interpretation staff. Our Parliament functions with simultaneous interpretation because we have 2 official languages in this country. And the Zoom calls are extremely hard on the interpreters. The volumes are variable, and they suffer a great number of auditory and cognitive injuries as a result of poor technology and MPs who at the best of times can't use it effectively. And our interpreters are burning out at an incredibly rapid rate. And MPs don't really seem to care about this. And apparently neither does this senator who thinks that these are great and that these should carry on. This is something that we should be concerned about. And what I see the danger of in trying to make this permanent is that it's going to depopulate Parliament. And most people think that Parliament is, question period, which it's not. But it also seems to, people seem to think that it's everything that happens on the record, committee interventions and speeches in the House of Commons and so on. Again, that's not where a lot of the real work happens. A lot of the real work is relationship building. And it's conversations that happen on the sidelines of committee rooms, particularly with stakeholders and witnesses. When MPs can have some face-to-face time with them, that builds the relationships that ensures that stuff gets done or that points of view get heard. That doesn't necessarily happen very effectively in a committee situation where MPs are trying to get a witness on the record to score points against one another. It's not effective and it's damaging. And if we lose the ability to have those face-to-face conversations on the sidelines in normal times, then that's an incredible loss for Parliament. MPs and senators being able to have conversations with one another in the lobbies, outside of the chambers, in corridors, and so on. Those relationships are incredibly important, and they're already strained because we've already been taking steps to make Parliament more family friendly, and all it did was decrease collegiality. One of the most egregious examples is when they stopped evening sittings in the early 90s. Before then, they would have evening sittings 3 nights a week, and the House would adjourn at 6 o'clock. They'd all trundle up to the parliamentary restaurant and have dinner together until 8 o'clock, and then they'd go back to the House and debate some more. But it was those 2 hours in the parliamentary restaurant that really allowed MPs to get to know one another as individuals across party lines, because they got to spend so much time getting to know one another. And it was also partially because at the time there were so few other restaurants in the area that they were all basically kind of forced to go to the parliamentary restaurant and eat together. And we've lost that. And once we lost that, because they ended evening sittings, then the collegiality collapsed. And what I see is a very big danger of trying to normalize or continue hybrid sittings once the pandemic is over is that MPs won't get a chance to interact personally anymore. It's just going to be through video screens. And when you're just in front of video screens, it allows MPs to stay in their partisan bubbles and treat one another like the enemy, instead of sparring in debate and then going for a drink afterward, which is the kind of ideal that we would like to see more of. And it happens less now because there are fewer opportunities, and if we allow these hybrid sittings to carry on, that will end completely. And that is a very, very bad thing for democracy, for Parliament, for our institutions as a whole. The other thing that I think is really important with this voting app is, again, it's going to be more of the same. MPs are going to want this to continue afterward, in part because it will be hand in hand with the hybrid notion of they can vote anywhere, but also because it will ostensibly take less time than a standing vote. And this again is also really misguided and dangerous to a certain extent. Parliament is a lot of, it's 800 years symbolic meaning that is all, kind of right there collected in the institution. And if we start taking away these symbolic aspects, like standing for votes, which is a visual representation of an MP literally standing for what they believe in, then we start eroding all of the other symbolic aspects of the institution, which are really incredibly important. Yes, standing votes take time, particularly when they're being done on a tactical basis. But that's what we are paying MPs to do, is to vote on our behalf in Parliament, in the House of Commons and senators in the Senate and the like. This is literally their job, and if they are looking for ways to get out of doing that job, I think that's not a good thing. And finally, the other aspect of this is keeping MPs away from Ottawa. Both reduces them to glorified social workers in their constituencies, which is a bad thing. I know they like to talk about how important constituency work is, and it's important for them to get elected. It's not their actual jobs. It's an aspect of it, but it's not the driving factor. And I think if we start prioritizing that over the other aspects that are MPs' jobs, like studying the estimates, like doing the hard work of accountability, then that's a bad thing. It also allows parties to really control the amount of information that MPs are able to get. And we've seen this through this pandemic where certain parties had information whips and so on, that were doing the funneling of information to their members. That's problematic in the extreme because it allows parties and you know, the leaders of parties way too much power in letting MPs know what is and is not going on. And I think that at least if they are in person, there are more opportunities for MPs to find out things on their own or to be told things that they may not get from their leadership teams. And so losing that on a more permanent basis would be devastating for the ability for MPs to do their jobs. So, and I guess my last point would be that if we are so concerned about travel costs and the environmental impact of that travel, then we should talk about MPs being in Ottawa for longer stretches and minimizing travel. And we have the power to change, you know, amend the calendar and to basically require MPs to be here and stay here for longer stretches. So a lot of MPs are here for 3 days a week. They come in on Monday afternoon and they are gone by Thursday afternoon, not even bothering with Friday sittings. And that's a problem. And I get that they have lives in their constituencies, but at the same time, they also have jobs to do here. And I think that if we really are serious about these impacts on the environment and, you know, the cost of the travel, then we should think about ways about making the time in Ottawa more valuable and, you know, more meaningful. Rather than the way it's kind of being treated now. And this is all eminently doable. You know, we could have had a parliamentary bubble and not have to deal with these hybrid sittings, not have the human impact on the staff and particularly interpreters. But it was a lack of will on MPs' parts. They insisted that they had that they needed to be in their constituencies. Never mind that most of them under stay-at-home orders and so on, or lockdowns of varying degrees. But, you know, they needed to be in their constituencies rather than in Ottawa, where they could have bubbled and kept Parliament going as normally as possible, which would have been a really powerful symbol for people to see that, you know, the work of the country was going on. They didn't do that, and now they're looking to normalize this state of affairs for once the pandemic is over. And that's a really bad state of affairs, and we should be ensuring that they aren't going to be allowed to get away with it once the pandemic is over. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter. Don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.